It is possible by this weekend, ground troops will be sent into Iran, which most military analysts believe to be either countereffective or suicidal. Today, I want to discuss how this war will end. So to first understand how the war is going, let's look at some video clips. So this is President Donald Trump. He's talking about the war.
They hit Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait. Nobody expected that. We were shocked. And the other one, they fought back. They could have yielded. But think of it, if we weren't around, they had tremendous power. They had thousands of missiles, most of which we've terminated. They had thousands of drones. They were making drones and missiles all over the...
So what he's saying here is, we went in expecting to hit them, kill their leadership, and then they would surrender. We didn't expect them to fight back. We didn't expect them to close the Strait of Hormuz. We didn't expect that they would hit Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, okay? So what he's saying is, we actually didn't have a plan going in. We really didn't think our enemies would fight back.
But the president's preference is always peace. There does not need to be any more death and destruction. But if Iran fails to accept the reality of the current moment, if they fail to understand that they have been defeated militarily and will continue to be, President Trump will ensure they are hit harder than they have ever been hit before. President Trump does not bluff, and he is prepared to unleash hell.
This is Karen Leavitt, and she's the press secretary for the White House. And what she's saying is, look, we've defeated these guys, but for whatever reason, the Iranians don't know that. That's the problem. The problem isn't us. We came in with the right strategy, we did everything right, but for whatever reason, the Iranians, being stupid, don't know they've been defeated.
Never in history has a modern military, Iran had a modern military, a modern navy, a modern air force, modern air defenses, leadership, massive bunker. Never has a modern military been so rapidly and historically obliterated, defeated from day one with overwhelming firepower. The air campaign that we've conducted, that Israel's conducted alongside us, was one for the history books, truly. And it's because we have a president of the United States that when he sends his warfighters out to fight, he unties their hands to actually go out and close with and destroy the enemy as viciously as possible from moment one. And that's why we see ourselves as part of this negotiation as well. We negotiate with bombs. You have a choice as we loiter over the top of Tehran, as the president talked about your future. The president has made it clear that you will not have a nuclear weapon. The War Department agrees. Our job is to ensure that. And so we're keeping our hand on that throttle as long as hard as it's necessary to ensure the interests of the United States of America are achieved.
So this is Secretary of War Peter Hegseth, and he represents the Pentagon, the military. And his attitude is, we're winning this war, we are kicking ass, and we don't have to negotiate because we're kicking ass. And we'll continue to do so, all right? So this is the attitude of the military. Now, the US media has been reporting that Donald Trump is seeking an off-ramp. He's seeking negotiations. And what Peter Hegseth says, no, let's negotiate with bombs, man.
This is a coordinated effort. We had a break the glass plan across the administration and at Treasury. We unsanctioned Russian oil. We knew that there were about 130 million barrels on the water, and we created supply that is beyond the Straits of Hormuz. So we anticipated this. We knew that there could be a temporary, and I want to emphasize temporary, choke point there, and there was 130 million barrels of floating storage. In the coming days, we may unsanction the Iranian oil that's on the water. It's about 140 million barrels, so depending on how you count it, that's 10 days to 2 weeks of supply that the Iranians had been pushing out. That would have all gone to China. In essence, we will be using the Iranian barrels against the Iranians.
So this is the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, okay? And he's responding to a problem, which is the Americans didn't expect that the Iranians would close off the Strait of Hormuz. And so this is affecting oil supply. The global economy could be disrupted or even destroyed if this lasts too long. So Scott Bessent says, we knew this was going to happen, and we have a really brilliant plan to destroy the Iranians once and for all. Our plan is this. We're going to let the Iranians sell their oil and make a lot of money. And then they'll be destroyed. Yeah. The Americans basically unsanctioned Iranian oil. And because of that, the Iranians were able to make $14 billion just like that. The total Iranian military budget for 1 year is $10 billion. So this is American genius at work. They knew this was happening. They knew the Iranians wanted to destroy the global economy. So the Americans were like, well, let's make them rich so they can't destroy the global economy. We got them now.
And yet Iran remains a threat to trade, a threat to the Straits of Hormuz. Then I would argue that we could have years of above $100, closer to $150 oil.
What happens to the global economy if that happens? How do we see it?
We'll have global recession.
So this is Larry Fink, and he's head of a company called BlackRock, which is the largest asset manager in the world. They control trillions and trillions of dollars. He's being interviewed by the BBC. What he's saying is, we can't stop this war now, because if we stop this war now, that means that the price of oil will be too high for many, many years. The Iranians will control the Strait of Hormuz, and therefore we must fight this war to the end. What he doesn't address is, well, if you didn't start this war in the first place, you wouldn't have this problem. Because the Iranians would have no pretext to close off the Strait of Hormuz, and the global economy would have been fine. But what he's saying is like, oh, don't worry about that. The problem is like, the war has started, and therefore we must fight to the end. So this is a drone launched by an Iranian proxy in Iraq, flying over an American base. And as you can see, there's nothing stopping it, okay? It's just flying over this American base. It's being remote controlled. It spots 2 American helicopters and destroys one of them. Meaning that you have all these American bases throughout the Middle East. They are vulnerable. They cannot be protected against cheap drones. So from an American perspective, this war will either bankrupt the Americans, or this war will be lost, okay? But it's very hard to fight this war against a determined enemy. I've said this many times, but the Americans are losing this war. And the main reason is the problem of hubris. I want to examine closely what this means strategically, what this means on the battlefield, okay? So war is fought across 4 dimensions. There is the narrative dimension, meaning global opinion, how history will perceive this war. There is the political dimension, meaning how your allies perceive this war, how your domestic base perceive this war. There's the economic, and then there's the military. If we examine this war closely, the Iranians are fighting a very different war from the Americans. What the Americans are doing is basically shifting the narrative, political sphere, and economic sphere to fit their economic strategy, decapitation, which forces surrender. So what they want to do is they want to not destroy the Iranian leadership, destroy the Iranian economy to force a surrender, in which case the Americans can dictate terms. That is their strategy, and that's about it. And they are forcing the narrative space, the political space, and economic space to conform to the military strategy, meaning that they expect the allies, NATO, they expect the media, they expect the economy to support this strategy. So, for example, in the political space, Donald Trump has ordered NATO to come and open up the Strait of Hormuz. And also, Donald Trump refuses to acknowledge the fact that this war is very unpopular back in America. In the economic space, what the Americans are trying to do is keep the price of oil low so that it does not disrupt the global economy. And they do that, of course, by unsanctioning Russian and Iranian oil, which benefits the Russian and Iranian economies. In the narrative space, they're basically trying to tell the media to follow the party line. Donald Trump has threatened journalists that if you do not report this war is going well, then I might put you in prison. So this is the American strategy, forcing the narrative, political, and economic spheres to conform to the military strategy. The Iranians have a different approach. The Iranians are using the military in order to impact the economic, political, and narrative spheres. Complete reverse. The military strategy is calibrated in a certain way to benefit the Iranian economy, okay? So what I mean by that is the military is strategically controlling the Strait of Hormuz so that Chinese ships can pass, right? Because Chinese ships are the main buyer of Iranian oil. Also, if you're willing to play ball like Japan or Qatar or Oman, they will also let your ships pass. So this is being strategic. Politically, the Iranians are trying to split the Gulf states, right? They know that Saudi Arabia and UAE are committed to regime change in Iran, but they know that Qatar and Oman are on the other side, okay? So they're trying to gain as much global leverage as possible within the GCC. And the narrative is they're trying to shape global opinion and trying to make everyone believe that they are on the right side of history. And most people believe that. In fact, you have a lot of Americans who are rooting for the Iranians to win. So from the American perspective, the fact that you have this approach of making the world conform to your military strategy basically means that you lack what we call reflection, okay? Meaning that you're not able to sit down with your strategists and discuss how this war is going and how to make changes. But the Iranians are able to do so because the military has to conform to the economic, political, and narrative strategy. Second is flexibility. And what I mean by that is the military strategy, if it's not going well for the Americans, they lack the capacity to reflect and make changes. So what they do is they double down. They accelerate the process of bombing in Iran, even though it's probably not getting them anywhere. Also, much more importantly, the Americans will choose much more self-destructive, desperate strategies, such as sending ground troops. It is possible by this weekend, ground troops will be sent into Iran, which most military analysts believe to be either countereffective or suicidal. The Iranians, on the other hand, can adapt their military strategy to the economic and political realities. Okay, so for example, what they're doing now is they're charging tolls to cross the Strait of Hormuz. And the third difference is the idea of resilience. So in other words, if you make the world and America conform to your military strategy, they won't support you. That means that if you're losing troops and you're losing equipment, it is very hard to replenish, resupply. Whereas the complete opposite in Iran, where because they are winning popular opinion, because their economy is becoming stronger in this process, because they're winning more political allies, they can actually draw on more support from the population, and they can also recruit foreign fighters and foreign support, foreign sympathy for their cause. So for these reasons, I believe that America is losing this war and that ultimately this war will be lost.